Hi, this is Susan Glenn, and I'm just going to give you a short introduction on how to read a scientific paper. This is for my ecology class. And for class, you're asked to pick one paper in the semester, and you are going, over the course of the term, you're going to review that, read it thoroughly, and that way we can all get an appreciation of the paper you selected. You're going to be setting up a blog with your review on it. Why would you read scientific papers? They're kind of dry and they're not easy to read. Uh, well, it might be like now you're just being told you have to. It does allow you to read what the current research is. You can look at the old classical papers and you can look at the current research. It allows you to, if you're doing research, to extend the results of the previous work. You build on the previous work, or you might want to replicate it, see if it still holds true. So in the 1950s, Robert MacArthur looked at warblers in Maine, and then you might want to go back and look at the same location and see if they're still doing the same things. It provides you with useful data that you could use maybe in a larger meta-analysis where you're pulling data from a number of different sources, or data that you're going to use as the basis for something that you're doing. Gives you pre-digested thoughts and ideas about what's going on. You might be doing some research, and reading the papers in different journals would allow you to decide where is the best place to publish your research. In the US, the Ecological Society of America has a journal called Ecology, and that's where you might find a lot of things that you're interested in. In Britain, they have the journal called the Journal of Ecology, make it simple. But there's other ecological journals like Conservation Biology will focus on the ecology around preserving and protecting and conserving populations and communities. One of the main reasons you're going to be reading papers in ecology classes, it teaches you how to write. So a scientific report that's published in a scientific journal and has gone through peer review is in the format that we're going to be writing our lab reports in. So you're going to be using the same format and the same approach, and this will set you very well for all your future classes, no matter what those classes are if you're writing lab reports. So being able to understand and read a paper is a first step. If you're going to read a paper, make sure that you have a quiet place where you can focus, remove distractions. You don't want to have, you're not going to be streaming uh, TV, you're not going to be watching a sports game. Just focus on the paper. Take notes, write things down. If there's words that you don't understand, look them up, write down the vocabulary, or make a note to look this up later. And if you get kind of stuck, just jump around. You don't have to like read it from beginning to end to start with. It's not a mystery novel. You're not going to spoil the ending. When you read the abstract, you've already spoiled the ending. So make sure that if you get stuck, don't worry about it. Just maybe flip through and take a look at the graphs or the figures, or they might have a map or a diagram, and that'll keep you going, keeps you moving in the paper. There's different types of paper. There's theoretical papers that describe new ecological models. There are experimental papers, which is probably what you're most thinking of, where you're describing the results of an experiment. And this could be an experiment where they actively change something, or it could be an experiment where there's sort of a natural experiment in nature that they are looking at the change of something over time or in different locations that have been exposed to different conditions. There are survey and review papers. These are papers that review all the research up till now in a field. I don't recommend you using one of those for this course because they cover too much. But they're extremely valuable for getting you up to speed in a certain area. When you're looking at papers, you're going to be trying to find something that's a primary paper, which is the actual description of the work and results reported by the people who did it. So you want primary literature. So you don't want to be reading about somebody else telling you about somebody's work. You want to read from the actual researchers. This is a snow leopard, by the way. It was caught in a photo from trail cam. Yeah, I thought it was pretty cute. This young snow leopard actually stole their trail cam from them. Uh, but you also want to make sure you're getting a peer-reviewed paper. So it's a scientific paper that's testing a hypothesis. It's peer-reviewed, and that's going to be more straightforward for you to work with. And peer review means that the other scientists have taken the time to go through the paper in detail and check for accuracies and provide feedback and comments to the authors, which they incorporated before it was published. So make sure you're not reading like a magazine article. It's not something from National Geographic. You're going to a scientific journal, and I'll show you how to find these papers. Um, Secondary references describe the work of others. In most papers in the introduction, they give you a background section describing previous work. That's kind of like a review of the work of others. The review papers are secondary as well. An encyclopedia, like going to Wikipedia for something, is a secondary reference. And your textbook is they're just telling you about research that other people did in the textbook, so that's a secondary reference. So try to read the primary references. If you're citing the primary reference in something, that means you've read it. You've not got stolen that citation from another reference. But secondary references are really useful too. They might be useful for defining things or catching you up on previous work. Paper organization, and this is going to be the same as our organization for our uh, lab reports as well. You're going to have the title and the authors, an abstract, introduction where you're going to pave the way for why the research was done and what the previous work was like, and it's going to tell you what your hypothesis was. Materials and methods are going to be described, including the methods used to analyze the data. And this is often in ecology papers where students get bogged down, is in the data analysis. And the results are going to include your figures and your captions. Then there's the discussion portion where you go back to the hypothesis, look at the results in context of whether the hypothesis was supported or can be rejected, how it relates to other papers, and draw some conclusion. And the references cited, which is an incredibly important and useful resource at the end of the paper, because you have all those citations for all those relevant papers. When you first look at a paper, first thing to look at is where was the paper published. So what kind of journal is it? Is it a national journal, an international journal? Is it just a small regional journal? Is the work similar to things you're interested in that you'd like to do? Give you ideas about which journals you could plan to publish your work in, what conferences you might want to go to. So if you're looking at papers published in the journal Ecology and you really like them, well, then maybe you would want to go to the Ecological Society of America's annual conference or regional conference. Over time, you'll learn to evaluate the journal quality based on the quality of papers you read. First thing you look at, of course, is the title, and that's just going to tell you what the paper's about. And then there's a list of authors, and it will give you the author's name, and then in a footnote, it'll tell you where they work, where they're from. This might be useful for you in the future. If you think you're going to go on and do graduate work or want to work in this area, these are the people that you may want to reach out to see, do they have funding? Are they looking for research assistance? So it can be useful for planning grad school. It could be useful for a future job. Could be people that you would want to collaborate with in the future. When you look at the list of authors, it could be alphabetical. So up on the slide, you can see I have snipped off of a paper, Productivity is a Poor Predictor of Plant Species Richness. This paper was published in Science. Science is like one of the top journals in the world. It's called Science Magazine. It's published in the US. It has the other top one in the world is Nature, and it's published in the UK. And they have vigorous peer review, very difficult to get in paper in. But you can see this one's got a massive authors list, and they just decided to put it in alphabetical order. Often with research papers, you'll have a ranked list, so you'll have like the first author is the one that basically spearheaded the research, did most of the work, most of the writing. The last one might be somebody who just got the funding for the project, but actually didn't do the project. They might have provided feedback. You might have the lab assistants listed in the list of authors. So the list of authors will be sort of could be ranked in an order of who did what, or it could just be alphabetical. The abstract gives you a brief outline of the results presented in the paper. Read this carefully. This way, you get a feel for whether you can understand the terminology. Do you understand the concepts? Do you know what the paper's about? I've seen people present papers in class where they clearly did not even understand what the paper was trying to do. And so make sure that you don't waste your time and that you are picking a paper that you can actually understand. If not, you're going to have a bit of work getting the background material, which is a good way to learn a lot of new things. Do the conclusions make sense to you? Can you come up with a solution to the problem addressed to the paper? Are you going to be comfortable reading this paper? So any paper, you should at least look at the title, the author list, and the abstract. And I skim a lot of papers this way just to before I read them and pull up the abstracts and get a feel for what's in the paper before I'm going to take much time, and then make a decision as to whether I want to go on with that paper. This is an example. I was looking for some papers just putting this presentation together. And I found this one in the journal Biological Conservation, which is a peer-reviewed journal, and it's on the economic benefit of tigers, Panthera tigris, to farmers in reducing crop and livestock losses in the eastern Himalayas, implications for conservation of large apex predators. Well, I thought that looked kind of cool. It's like, do tigers actually help farmers? How does that work? You think the tigers are going to eat their stuff? And then you go through and you're reading the abstract, and all of a sudden you might just find yourself getting bogged down a little bit as you go. And it talks about leopards and dholes, and I didn't know what those were, and trying to figure out, okay, well, I don't know, this is kind of large, looking a little more complicated, but I thought, you know what, I will stick with it and read more of this paper, see if I can get more information. So I moved into the introduction. The introduction introduces the problems that were addressed in the paper, so the questions that they wanted to answer, and prior articles. So you can see, is this going to be building on previous research? It gives you also pointers to other papers that you might be interested in reading. So when I look at the introduction, I can see that there's quite a few references in here. So the very first paragraph, they're talking about mesopredator release and trophic cascades, but I have the references and I can look these up and I can figure out. So I write down this vocabulary, and so I can understand the background. And then they say, paradoxically, farmers in developing and biodiversity rich countries often experience economic loss through negative interactions with wild predators and herbivores. Um, Even though they can find that the predators might be attacking other predators. So the farmer's poor understanding of the ecological role of predators, livestock loss may consequently lead to retaliatory killings of large apex predators such as tigers, leopards, and dholes. Okay, dholes. Oh, that's interesting. I wonder what that means. Um, so negative human-predator interactions have overshadowed potential benefits. Okay, I'm starting to get more interested in this paper. When you get into the methods are the meat of the paper. It's how the work was performed. And when you read those, you're going to see, is there enough information provided to you to understand how the work was done? What's missing? Is the paper correct? I usually read the methods last, or it might be when I'm looking at a figure and I don't understand it, I go back to the methods. Sometimes I will just skim through this and not spend so much time at the beginning on the methods. When you look at the methods of this one, you can see how I could get bogged down. So it talks about a generalized linear mixed model and a Poisson distribution and a quasi-Poisson or a negative binomial regression model. This is where you might need some help. You can look these things up. It's a little more complicated. So this is where you might want to turn to your instructor and ask for some help and help work you through some of these methods. It can take a time. And this is why you need to share a copy of your paper as well, because I'm going to need it. If I'm going to understand what was going on, I'm going to actually have to read the paper. The results, they write out the conclusions of the research, so of the actual results. So they're giving you in words what we found. And sometimes it might expand on some of those statistical like type questions that popped up while they were looking at them. When you're looking through the results, then you're looking at the data, you're looking at the tables, and you're thinking to yourself, what conclusions um, do you draw from the data? Does the experiment support the conclusions that the authors came up with? So you look at the data and get your own feel for it before you read what they've drawn as a conclusion. There might be alternative ways of looking at it, and maybe different ways of setting up the experiment or analyzing the data. And making sure the figures don't lie, making sure all the data is sitting there in the figures. So here's some results from the Dole paper, and this is when I started to get excited. This paper is when I got to see some of the things that they were actually finding. And so they were looking at places where tigers were absent from villages, from the areas around the villages, and where tigers were present in the areas around the villages. So they, they were looking at villages that were inside a national park in India. And we can see there's where tigers are absent, there were the dholes and the leopards that were preying on livestock. And where there were tigers present, there's dholes and tigers, and dholes, leopards, and tigers. And then this is livestock loss. So the bars are showing you the livestock loss. So that was the number of incidents is the gray line. And then, so this is the incidence here, which is crop loss. And then the white is showing you the livestock loss. And we can see that we had more losses when tigers were absent than when tigers were present. So and the actual number of villages in each one of these different combinations is given as well. So that's pretty cool because I can see that when tigers are around, less crops were damaged and less livestock was lost. So the tigers were obviously preying on things that were eating the crops, but they're also doing something to the other predators. This is when I had to look up what everybody looked like. I knew what a tiger looked like, a Bengal tiger. We have the dhole, which is an Indian wild dog, and then we have the leopards. And so I thought that's when I started to get excited to pick the paper. I think the discussion and the introductions are the hardest parts to write of a scientific paper. The methods, you know what you've done, the results, you can see what the results are, but the discussion is really where you're going to figure out how your study relates to other studies, whether you supported the hypothesis, maybe some speculation as to some other things that were going on. And when you're reading the discussion, see if you draw the same conclusions from the results. And in the discussion, you should be thinking, just as the authors are, of what could be done next. Instead of starting at the beginning of a paper and plowing your way through the end of the paper, I recommend using this three-pass approach to reading scientific papers. Each pass gives you a specific goal and it builds on the previous pass. So the first pass, you get a general idea about the paper. The second pass lets you grasp the content, but not all the details. And the third pass helps you understand the paper in depth. For the papers you'll be doing your blogs on, you'll be presenting to the rest of the class, you'll be doing the third pass, so you'll go all the way through. But if you're reading other people's papers and you're kind of looking at what they're doing, you might not go all the way. The first pass, it's quick, 5 to 10 minutes. You're carefully reading the title, the abstract, and the introduction. And you can sort of skim through the rest of the paper. You can see what the sections and the subsection headings are, but you're really just looking at the first part of the paper. When you've done that, you really accomplish these 5 C's. You've got the category. You know what type of paper it is. Is it a field experiment, an observational experiment? Are they developing a theoretical model? Is it a review paper? Context. What are the papers are related to? What theoretical basis were they using to analyze a problem? So what was their hypothesis based on? Correctness. Do the assumptions they're making appear to be valid, or does this look like it's going to be bias, that they're trying to prove a point? Contributions. What are the paper's major contributions? You'll get that right away. And can you read it? Is it well written? Is it clear for you? And so you'll get a lot of information quite quickly. Using this information, you might choose, okay, I'm not going to read any further. I'm not interested in this, or I don't know enough about this. I can't understand this paper at this point. And the authors maybe are making some invalid assumptions. So this might be adequate for papers that aren't in your area, or might be someday proving relevant. Make some notes. Keep track of what papers you have done the first pass on, and that way you can know whether to go back to them later or not. The second pass is going to take you about an hour. You're going to look at the results. So look carefully at the tables, the figures, the diagrams, the illustrations. It's like sort of you're flipping through looking at the pictures. Pay special attention to the graphs. Look at the axes. Can you tell what's going on? Read the discussion. Does that make sense? Do you agree with what's going on? You can mark relevant unread references for further reading. This is a good way to learn more about the background of the paper. So there might be things that you might want to look up because they're key to understanding the paper. So you're looking at the results and the discussion here. So in the second pass, after you finish reading, so you already did the first pass, now you did the second pass, you can now say, okay, I've read enough. I'm going to put this aside. Maybe I don't have to understand everything else, but I've certainly got a lot of information. I'm going to come back to this later. I might need to read more of the background material before I can go on, or yeah, I'm going to go on and get at the details. I need to make sure I really understand this paper. Take some notes, keep track. That way you'll know that you read it and what it was about. The third pass, you've already read the abstract, you've already read the discussion, you've already read the introduction, you've already read the results. So now you're left with going through the methods. So you might want to skim through those other parts again, and then you're going to get into details on the methods. So you're not reading it in the order that it was presented. It wasn't written in the order that it was presented. We write in a different order as well. We don't write in this order either. We usually write the results first, then the methods, then we might go between the discussion and the introduction and read the or write the abstract last. So the third pass can take a while. It's because you are paying attention to the detail. And as you get better at reading these papers and you read more in a field, you can get faster and faster. So it might be eventually you get down to being able to read a paper in an hour. So the sooner you start learning how to read these papers and practicing writing papers, the faster you're going to get at it. It's going to help you further in your career. So you should be able to see what the assumptions that have been made. You should be able to challenge those assumptions. You should jot down your ideas, your conclusions, the problems you have with the paper as you're going. You're really paying attention to the details and make sure you understand the methods, including the analysis. And you should, once you've done this, you should be able to reconstruct the entire structure of the paper from memory. You know it as well as anyone, and you should be able to identify its strong and weak points. So if you were talking about the paper with somebody else, you should be able to put it in your own words, and you should be able to uh, refer to things without notes at this point. How are you going to find a paper? There's a lot of references in your textbook, a lot of examples of different studies. So you could start with one of those papers and look those up. You could Google it, but it's not very efficient just to Google. You're going to find a lot of crap as well. But if you go to Google Scholar, which is scholar.google.com, you can find papers. But I strongly recommend using a database, an online database, and using your college library databases is your most efficient way of searching for an article. You want to be able to find articles that you can find the whole text, so you want to be able to download a PDF or be able to see the whole paper online. And you also want to be able to specify you're looking for peer-reviewed papers. So these are papers that have been sent out for review by the editors of the journals. They've been sent to experts in the field, so they're sent to other scientists that work in that area, and they do anonymous reviews. So peer review is a thorough anonymous reviews. They send those back to the editor. The editor will read all those reviews, read the paper, and then send the reviews to the authors and say, we can't publish this until you fix these problems, or yes, we're interested in it, but you've got a few ideas here that you need to consider, or no, we're rejecting the paper, and here are the issues that the reviewers had. So it's a very rigorous process. So I'm going to show you how to actually do some searches. A lot of people will just go straight into Google and look for a paper, and that's not your most efficient way of doing things. If you're going to use Google, go to Scholar Google or Google Scholar, scholar.google.com. And there then you're able to look for articles right away. And you can put in whatever it is you're interested in looking at. So let's say I was interested in tiger ecology, and now I have a whole bunch of articles listed about tiger ecology. As you can see, I use the scientific name. If you're interested in a particular species, you're more likely to narrow down to that species. If I just put tiger ecology, I could get tiger beetles. I could get all sorts of different things with tiger in the name. And then here I can see not only is it giving me the title and the authors, but a little snippet of the first few lines of the papers, and it will show you where you have PDFs. And some of these PDFs are not free, not publicly available. Other ones are, so you would just have to click on them and see if it takes you to a paywall or not. And the paywalls are probably your biggest problem with looking for papers. And so this is how I actually found the paper that I was using in the first part of the presentation on the ecological benefit of tigers. Um, and, uh, and you can see there were different ones in here. So you can find quite a bit to look at. If you end up with a paywall, then you may want to not use Google Scholar, but instead go through the college library website because they have access to more papers than this. You'll have better luck using your college resources and going to your college library online articles. So I'm going to run College of South Jersey's website, and you can search for library. I can go to current students, go down the side to library, and then When we get to the library website, over here it says articles and more. So I click on that. That takes me to the different databases by subject. So you can do a global search. So let's say I was interested in tigers. I could do a global search for tigers, but once again, I would get, just like in Google, I would get papers that were dealing with poetry and other aspects of tigers. So there's a biology section here. That's just the ProQuest database. I don't like the ProQuest database. It's not over a very long time span. So I'm going to go down to the science one, but if you don't find what you want in science, you can look at the biology one. And so the science one has ProQuest, it has Gale, and it also has EBSCO. So I'm going to go to the EBSCO one here. You log in using your college login, just like you would regularly get into the portal. And I'm on the search page for EBSCO. So when I'm here, I can put in tiger, but I'd rather use the scientific name, because that way I know what I'm going to get. I'm going to get the animal that I'm looking for. This is on the basic search. You can go to an advanced search depending on whether you have more things in particular you are looking for related to the tiger, but I'm going to just stay here with the basic search on Panthera tigris. Panthera tigris. And then there's some choices in the basic search I would want to check on. I went too fast. I didn't check all of these. One is that I want full text and peer reviewed. So it has to have been reviewed by other scientists. So I only want peer reviewed journals. I don't care what year, but you might. And then I'm going to run my search. So now I see various papers dealing with tigers. I'm going to look for things where they're actually looking for testing hypotheses, so you can read the descriptions in the abstracts. If you find a paper that you are interested in, I'm just going to scroll down here. If you find a paper you're interested in, then you have to click on Full Text Finder. Sometimes these take you to a paywall, sometimes they don't. So before you go too far, make sure you are actually finding one that you can access. And so here I have one that I can actually get the full text of. I've got the entire paper here, and can scroll down through. What I recommend doing though is downloading it, save a copy of the paper, and example, tiger paper, and save. And that way I have it sitting on my computer so I can access it every time. What I can also do with this paper is to share it with the rest of the class, and I can put it into my OneDrive. Everyone has a OneDrive with the college website, and just put it in a folder that you share with others and put a link to it on your blog, and that way people can actually get to the original paper, and I'm going to have to get to your original paper as well. So when you're looking through the paper, you can see it has an abstract, an introduction. And this is the same way you would write your lab reports. This one has a nice full description of the study area as part of the methods with really nice maps. You can use that in your blog. They give you the methods that they used. They give you the data analysis in the methods section. And then they look at their results. And when you're looking at the results, they have the tables in here, discussions. They got the graphs, the figures. So pay attention. Same thing with your textbook, does the same thing. Tables have the caption at the top that explains what these things are, but you really can then go back to the methods to get a better feel, or go back to the results, get a better feel what's in that table. And then when you look at figures, the figures have the caption at the bottom that explain what's going on in the figure. Um, so we've got discussion, we're still going through them. We have acknowledgments, who funded them, who helped them, and then the references cited. And these references cited are really useful when you read the paper. Sometimes they'll be talking about hypothesis or technique, and you can go to those papers to take a look at what they were referring to. Also up here I have a link to the full text here. This has got my title, authors. There's more authors here, so you got to make sure you get the complete author list. The journal is Oryx, volume 52, issue 1. The date it was published, 2018, and the page numbers. So you need to put all of that in there, and that way you've got the full citation. So find something you're really excited about, something that you're interested in, and share that with the class so that everybody can read the paper. So once you've found a paper and you're reading a paper, you still might find things that you don't understand. Look things up. You can quickly look stuff up on your phone as you go. So I didn't know what a dole was, so I looked it up on my phone quickly. Use your textbook. Look things up there. Ask me for help. Ask your instructor for help. And you can also go back and read some of the articles in the introduction or in the discussion, or if it's something dealing specifically with the methods and you don't understand those methods, they might cite some papers that use those methods. So it can take some time, but it's important to actually get the background that you need to understand the paper. So they are assuming that you might understand or know things. Look up the words of vocabulary. Take the time to do that, and that way you'll understand the paper. If you do review a paper over the course of a semester, you've got lots of time to actually figure things out. My most important advice is read something you're interested in. Find something you're passionate about. If you love orchids, pick an orchid paper. If you love elephants, pick an elephant paper. If you want a predator-prey situation, pick something dealing with predator-prey situations. Or it might be a location. I'm fascinated with the Great Barrier Reef, and I want to find papers dealing with that. Or a particular type of ecosystem. I might want to be interested in the Arctic tundra or the deserts or some pine barrens of New Jersey, whatever you are passionate about. It could be a problem. It could be coral bleaching. It could be climate change. It could be pollution effects on dolphins. It could be endangered pandas. Whatever it is you're passionate about, you're going to take some time. You're going to read the paper with more interest if you are focusing on something that you truly do care about. So pick things that you're excited about and that you want to share with somebody else, and that way you'll put more of an effort into it as well. Looking forward to seeing your reviews and seeing what papers you pick.